Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank this panel for joining us today. Obviously, the video was very disturbing, and hopefully it serves as a warning into the future for anybody that would think to do likewise. I don't believe any member in this room would deny the fact that Russia, led by Mr. Putin, is a destabilizing factor in this world. The Russians have developed an advanced set of tools to apply pressure on democracies around the world, and they've shown their willingness to use it. Whenever Putin attempts a new maneuver, he waits to see the international community's response, and when nothing happens, he escalates. One of the first tools developed and deployed by the Kremlin was to hide behind the guise of protecting ethnic Russians to invade Georgia and Ukraine. While open hostilities between Russia and Georgia began in 2008, it was Putin's distribution of passports to Georgians earlier that laid the groundwork for Russian intervention. In Ukraine, Putin claimed that ethnic Russians were being persecuted as a precursor for intervention. By using little green men instead of the Russian military, the Kremlin was able to deny any involvement in the invasion and occupation of Ukrainian territory. Both Ukraine and Georgia have been stalwart allies of the United States since gaining their independence. Ensuring their territorial sovereignty of these two countries is essential to European security and to American interests. When personal interests are at stake for Vladimir Putin and his allies, the Russians do not hesitate to utilize their forces to engage in international affairs. In 2015, Bashar al-Assad was losing control of Syria. He requested assistance from the Kremlin, who were more than willing and dutifully bound to help protect their naval base in Syria. In exchange for Russian air power, Assad granted Putin a 50-year lease to the airbase, the same location where they've launched waves of attacks on civilian centers and hospitals, killing thousands of men, women, and children, which continues to this day. It's not just in Europe or the Middle East where Russia is attempting to exert their influence. Earlier this year, we saw the Kremlin provide Nicolas Maduro with soldiers to protect Russian investment in Venezuelan energy sector and provoke the United States by getting involved in our hemisphere. The Russian Federation has long used energy as a weapon to coerce, manipulate, and create conflict around the world. One of my growing concerns is how European and Eurasian countries have become reliant on Russian gas and oil without a domestic backup. Through the almost completed Nord Stream 2 pipeline project, Russia will soon control our European allies' energy markets. That's why I introduced H.R. 1616, the European Energy Security and Diversification Act with Chairman Keating. This legislation would help our partners defend themselves from the malign activities of Russia by developing and diversifying their own energy sources. I hope our Senate colleagues can pick this up and pass it quickly. While hindsight's 20/20, we must be able to learn from our mistakes and adapt. Prior to the 2016 elections, Russia engaged in one of the most sophisticated information operations to date against the United States. This past February, the Russians tried to halt the democratic progress being made in Moldova by manipulating their elections. As a result, the pro-Russian Socialist Party won 35 seats in the election, while the pro-Western Democratic Party won 30. We must remain vigilant, and I have no doubt that Russia will continue to do similar attacks on democracies going forward. Just this week, the EU will be holding their parliamentary elections. The Russians will look at every possible avenue to sow discord and division across the continent to further strain democracy in Europe. It further shows us why the topic of this hearing is so important. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses about Russia's malign activities today and how the United States can best defend itself and go on the offense against them. And one of the things I think is extremely important is simply exposing Russian tactics to be able to disinfect against them. If you're looking at Twitter or Facebook or social media and you see a story that looks crazy, it probably is. It's probably not true. And unfortunately, we live in a moment where people automatically accept the narrative that they're predisposed to instead of thinking critically about if this is a disinformation campaign. So again, I thank the chairman for calling this important hearing. I thank the witnesses for being here, and I yield back the balance of my time.